How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be installing a Moroso oil pan that doesn't fit. So let's roll that intro and get into it. Alright, so for those of you who are new to the channel, this is my fully built H22 A1, which I'm currently in the process of doing a turbo build on. So internals are done, head is on, and I picked up a baffled oil pan, which I want to install today. So I got the old oil pan off, and I've tried test fitting the Moroso oil pan already, and it does not fit for some reason. So at first, before actually installing it with the gasket, I just wanted to test fit it to make sure it was going to fit. And I held it up there and I could not get it to seat properly. So I figured maybe it was the studs or something were getting in the way, or maybe they didn't align properly. So I ended up extracting all the studs out of here. There were 6 of them in total. And then I put the oil pan back up to it again, and I was ending up with the same problem. So to install this oil pan, you kind of have to rock it one way and then slip it up and over the pickup, because the baffle kind of goes up and around the oil pickup. So in doing that, I was able to get it to fit nicely over the pickup, but when I go to seat it on the engine block, it seems like it's teetering on something. So I wasn't 100% sure how to figure that out. So I ended up contacting Moroso about it, and they got back to me right away, so that was good. My first question was actually if an aftermarket oil pickup was necessary for this. Because I was in contact with a few of the H series guys on the Facebook page, and they said they had installed an aftermarket oil pickup, and they didn't have that problem. So I was then given the understanding that I needed to change up my pickup in order for this to work. Now a buddy of mine, he has a B series, and he's running the equivalent oil pan on his B series, and he was able to run it with an OEM pickup on it. So I thought it was kind of strange that it would be H series specific, that you had to get an aftermarket pickup. So I contacted Moroso, asking them specifically, like, do I need an aftermarket pickup? And they said, no, this oil pan is designed for an OEM oil pickup. So they're trying to troubleshoot with me to find out kind of what the problem is. So I kind of told them what was going on, and they haven't got back to me yet with any other ideas on what it could be. And I was planning on getting this oil pan installed this weekend, so I kind of want to get that done by whatever means necessary. So this is what I've done. So basically I started off by inspecting the inside of the oil pan to see if there were any scratch marks or any signs that it was contacting on anything. And I couldn't really see anything, so I wiped it all down nice and clean. And then I test fitted it again a couple of times. And what I ended up noticing was there was a bit of residue on this part and this part. And then when I looked under the engine, I could see the same kind of marks under there as well. So I wanted to be sure that that was the point that it was contacting on. So what I ended up doing is I took some just axle grease and smeared a little bit here and a little bit on here, just to see if that was the contact points. And when I test fit it again, this is what I came up with. So I can see right up here, I have a bit of grease, so I know that it was contacting there, but also here. The right thing to do, I should probably contact Moroso and get it done properly, but I really want to get this done this weekend, and I don't want to have to deal with sending stuff back. So I'm probably just going to end up notching this out, or maybe even just bashing it in with a hammer or something, just to clearance it enough, because I only need maybe 2 or 3 mils, and then I should be able to seat it properly. So I might just try clearancing these and make that work. All right, so I got the oil pan set up on the workbench here, and what I'm going to try doing is using a hammer and a punch. I got my spots marked kind of where I want to clearance it. So I'm just going to start beating on this thing, and hopefully that works. All right, guys, so I bashed it in a bit, and let's have a look at where we're at here. So I got a straight edge, and This used to be flat all the way across, and you can kind of see how much difference that made in that spot. And in the other spot, quite a bit of clearance there now, all the way along here. So I'm gonna test fit this now and see how it goes. All right guys, so I'm using the same method I did before. I got some grease on the contact areas from before, and I'm gonna see if it leaves any residue behind on the engine. So it seems to be fitting now, but let's pull this off and see if we have any residue. Doesn't look like it inside the pan. And we're all clean down here. So I should be able to mount this thing now. All I had to do is clearance those two areas, and looks good. So one more thing before I go to install this oil pan is I noticed around the welds here, there is a lot of weld spatter. And I want to clear some of that up as much as I can, because if all of a sudden one of those ends up in one of my bearings inside the engine, I'm going to be in a lot of trouble. So I'm going to get a scraper and try getting rid of as much of that spatter as I can, get this nice and clean before I install it, and then we should be good to go.
The next day.
All right guys, this is my last test fit before the actual install. So I reinstalled all my studs, tried to test fit it again, and the pan did not fit. It was not lining up with my studs. So I ended up having to drill out the holes, and I believe I used a 5/16 drill bit to do that. So it's about one step bigger than what they were, but I was just barely able to get the holes to line up now with the holes drilled out. So it fits, it's still tight, but I was able to get it in there. Then my next worry was whether or not the bolts were gonna line up. So I got every single bolt in right now. They're just finger tight. There's no gasket on here or anything yet. I just wanted to make sure everything was gonna line up, and it does now. Man, the stuff I had to do to get this thing to fit is ridiculous. You should just be able to unbox it and install it, but no, I had to do a lot of customizing to this thing to make it work. But I'm gonna take it off now, get it prepped, get everything cleaned off, get the gasket ready, and then we'll do the final install. All right guys, so I've deburred the holes that I drilled, blown everything off with the air compressor to make sure that there's no debris inside here. I've gone over it again with brake clean as well as the underside of the block. So I think we're finally ready to install this. So the repair manual that I'm using is saying to use RTV on this corner and this corner. So I find with these gaskets, it's easier to install the gasket over the studs on the block, and that'll kind of hold it in place while you're putting the oil pan up. For me, it's way too difficult to try and keep the gasket positioned on here and try and get it in the block and get all the studs to line up properly. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to throw some RTV onto the pan itself in this corner and in this corner. I might even go in here a little bit. I don't want to go too heavy on it, but just in this area here, I really want to make sure it's going to seal. And then if I come over to the block, I'm going to do the same thing up here. I'm just going to throw some in this corner and in that corner there, and then we should be good to go. Then I will just slip the gasket over the studs, put the pan on, and hopefully all goes well this time. Okay, so now I have 4 nuts in place, 2 in the back and 2 up front, just barely on there, enough to keep the pan on. I don't want to put any pressure on it yet because I want to make sure that it's aligned properly. So I'm going to inspect it all the way around and on the other side, and it looks really good. Everything looks to be lined up properly. So I still don't want to put too much pressure on here so that the gasket still has a little bit of room to move. because as I put the bolts in, then that'll help align it all the way. So I'm going to just barely start the threading on everything to make sure that it's aligned, and then I can start tightening. Okay, so all the nuts and bolts are just started to get threaded in. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to tighten them all finger tight. I'm just gonna use a socket to do that. It makes it a bit easier. I'm gonna finger tighten them in the same sequence as the torque sequence shown in the repair manual. So I'm gonna start on that. Once I get everything finger tight, then I can get out the torque wrench, and then I'm gonna start torquing. All right, so I don't know if I use the proper torque sequence when finger tightening, but it's close enough just for finger tightening. I'll follow it a bit more exact when using the torque wrench, but it's basically a star pattern, and the torque spec is 9 foot-pounds, and my torque wrench only does inch-pounds, so that would be 108 inch-pounds. I'm gonna set mine to 110. And then we should be good to go. So I'm gonna get to torquing these. I'm gonna follow the torque sequence a bit more exact this time. And yeah, we should finally be done this. All right, guys, well, we are done. Everything's torqued to spec. I went over it 3 more times with the torque wrench just to make sure I didn't miss anything. And as you tighten everything around and everything starts to settle, then it's good to go over it again just to make sure that everything is the same torque. So we're good there. Didn't miss anything. It was a little difficult because in the manual it shows the torque sequence as if you're laying underneath the car. So it was a little more difficult doing it this way because I had it on my phone face up. So it was kind of backwards. But once you got the hang of it, then it wasn't too bad. It wasn't too hard to follow. So got her done, finally. All right, guys, well, that's about gonna wrap up the video for today. So overall, not terribly happy with the quality of the oil pan. For how much you pay for it, I would assume that it would just bolt right up, but that wasn't the case on this one. For other engines, maybe it works just fine, but for this one, it was a real headache. So had to clearance the baffle to make sure that it would clear. And once that was clear, then it wouldn't clear the studs. So I ended up having to drill out the holes a bit larger in order to compensate for them being a little bit misaligned. So I'm hoping that doesn't cause me problems down the road. I don't think it'll cause any oil leaks because I didn't change the gasket at all. It was just the holes on the oil pan itself. So fingers crossed that nothing's gonna go wrong there. But at the end of the day, we got it installed. It looks great. I hope it performs great. And yeah, so if you like the video, guys, definitely give it a thumbs up. I hope this was helpful for some of you. If some of you come across the same issue, hopefully this could help you out in some way. If you have any advice for me, if you're loving the build, definitely drop a comment below. Let me know what you think. And definitely subscribe if you haven't already. And we'll see you guys on the next one.